Sthiti Prakarana, The Sustenance, Chapter 4, The Story of Dashura. The rough metal road, packed with red soil, meandered through small hillocks. At some places, the rocks had been cut to create the space for the road. On both sides, there was multitude of trees of all species and shapes. But the principal among them were the cashews and the tamarind, which spread their mildly pungent fragrance. The road took a course that led into the deeper woods. As one continued, the road became rather steep and the woods thicker. The trees were populated by langurs, the black-faced, long-tailed monkeys, who curiously watched the pilgrims or nature lovers as they walked by. Amidst all the chirpings of birds and other sounds, one could distinctly listen to the water falling from a height. The descent started, and one was led to a cup-like formation, and the two waterfalls, one larger than the other. The larger one was called Ram Tirth, while the smaller one was called Lakshman Tirth. This place was a few kilometers away from the sleepy little town of Honnavar in what is now called as the Uttara Kannada district or North Karnataka. The twin waterfall, named after the true royal brothers from the epic Ramayana, was claimed to have curative powers by the local people. It was said that even mad persons were brought back to sane life if they were made to stand under the waterfall. As is very common in every part of our country, where everything gets a religious tinge, the twin waterfall had been considered to be a place of pilgrimage. Even at the peak of summer, the fall did not dry, and one more interesting thing about this was that no one knew the origin of the water, and some of the orthodox people even said that it was irreligious to seek the origin. Perhaps to defy this denial, many a youth tried to find out the origin. One does not know whether anyone succeeded or not, but they all must have had their share of adventure, and at least a few stories for their children and grandchildren. Something similar happens when one starts thinking deeply about the world around us, the order, the rhythm, the beauty, and the interdependence. The question, what is the origin of this creation, is natural to most of us. We do not know whether there is really an answer to this question, but definitely this appears to be one of the primary questions that may have given birth to philosophy. It appears that the various theories of creation are the interesting stories of adventure from those who venture to pursue this question in the wonderful world of thought. Scriptures like Yoga Vasishta, advocating the Advaita, the non-duality, keep repeating that multiplicity or the world is only a manifestation of the ultimate reality. Invariably, this statement of fact gives birth to the question, how does the non-dual, ever-perfect Brahman manifest itself into the imperfect world with all its multiplicity in the mind of the seeker? The experienced wise say that this question does not have any answer at the intellectual level, and when one transcends mental activity, the problem is not solved, but it gets dissolved. An episode from the life of Gautama the Buddha illustrates this point. Buddha, as it is well known, always discouraged philosophical discussions and stressed on the experimentation and experience. It is said that once a wise old philosopher came for a discussion with the Buddha. As is wont, the enlightened one was sitting under a tree. The visitor was about to start the discussion, but the Lord said that he could discuss only when the man of knowledge stayed with the Sangha for a year and observed all the discipline and followed the spiritual practices. The Buddha promised that he would have the discussion with the philosopher at the end of the year. A man sitting under a nearby tree started laughing and said that if at all one wants to have a talk with Tathagata, it has to be at the very beginning, because after a year with Tathagata, one's life will be totally transformed and there could be no discussion, as one would transcend all thought. The philosopher looked helplessly at the enlightened one, who only smiled and said, for the discussion to take place, his condition had to be followed. Thirsty that the philosopher was for knowledge, he stayed on and followed every little rule and diligently practiced meditation. At the end of the year, Tathagata called the man and made him sit in front of him and asked him to begin the discussion. The man who had experienced the deep states of his being and had transcended the mind just touched the feet of the Buddha and said that all his questions and even the desire for discussion had dissolved. But not everyone is experienced to be at such a lofty level so as to start the quest right away. And with most of us, the mind with all its activity is so strong that unless some food is given in the form of explanations to its questions for appeasing, at least temporarily, it cannot start the quest. Here comes the role of the different theories of origin. And there are so many of them that one is bound to get confused. But one need not get confused with such diversity, as each theory is only a point of view of the intellect. The present Sarga devotes a small portion for such a view. At this juncture, we have to face a real paradox in spirituality. All along we are told that the truth transcends all language and description, and that we should not get attached to the words. Logic, of which we are all so proud, says immediately, then why use words at all? If it is beyond language, then how can one possibly talk about it? The question is very logical, but we must remember that logic as such has only two openings, either yes or no. But life has not only these two, but both, as it transcends mind. And language and logic are both children of the mind. However, logic and language can definitely be pointers to indicate the truth. The human weakness for words makes us hold on to the words instead of using them to understand and experience that which they indicate. That is why we must remember that the purpose of these viewpoints is only to quieten the intellect and its questions. Perhaps for this reason, sage Vasishtha starts this story with the sound advice for the seeker to develop disinterest in the world and to totally eschew sense indulgence and mental involvement of any kind. One may ask, what a theory of creation or the origin of the universe has got anything to do with involvement and indulgence? Actually, any mental activity is a potential desire, taking the comprehensive view of the desire to be the continuance of mental activity. Involvement and indulgence act as fertilizers for the perpetuation of this activity. Vasishtha said that the seeker has to transcend all mental activity and experience. For this, he continued, one has to use the mind itself just as one makes use of a thorn to remove the thorn from the body. The sacred Shastras play the role of the needle in removing the thorn of ignorance, and if one gets stuck with the words used in the Shastras, then the very purpose of the scriptures is defeated. But the Jnanins who have given us these scriptures out of their compassion for us are neither governed by the mental activity nor do they find any need for it, as they transact in this world from an entirely different level. And they make proper use of the words for transcending the words themselves. Vasishta warns us through Rama that one has to consciously remember to slowly but surely loosen the grip of the attachment to the objects of senses as well as the mind. With this primary understanding, whatever one does or thinks takes only one towards bondage. It was at this point that Rama asked as to how possibly could the heterogeneity that is experienced by the senses and conceived by the mind be one without the second? To this question, Vasishta replied that it is almost like the one Akasha, though permeating all objects, being inseparable from them, is also distinct from them, and through it manifests as Ahankara and its illusion-inducing progeny, it remains totally unaffected by them. But the ignorant identify themselves with these manifestations, subjecting themselves to pain-inducing rebirths. And the beauty is that even the so-called ignorance and suffering is possible only because of the imperishable and one reality which is behind all experiences. A few examples may help us to understand the seemingly confusing statement. Air carries the vibrations of sound without itself getting affected. It carries the molecules which create a sense of fragrance or oppressive smell. Thus, without the carrier air, the smell or the sound is not possible. Similarly, the same water assumes the multiplicity of waves and froth, and without water, they cannot exist. However, the examples, as always, are incomplete. There is the case of a person who acted as Abraham Lincoln. The drama group would travel all over the country to present the life of one of the greatest presidents of America. The actor in the man playing Abe Lincoln got better of the man as there was total identification with the role, so much so that even outside the theater he continued to be Abe Lincoln, as it was no more a character for him but a reality. Something similar happens to us when we wrongly identify with the manifested world instead of identifying ourselves with the non-dual reality and suffer needless misery. This oneness with the whole should be taught to only such persons who have developed sufficient dispassion and are not likely to misuse the knowledge. This is not only because the theoretical knowledge helps only in the justification of even our limitations, but it may give a wrong impression in the person's mind that only the intellectual explanation is everything. Concept of adhikara or eligibility has been of great importance in our culture. The attitude and aptitude were very carefully considered before any knowledge was imparted in our gurukuls. Even the modern psychologists agree with this when they observe that the knowledge tends to become useless if the aptitude is absent, and it is likely to be misused if the attitude is wrong. Sri Ramakrishna would stop talking on spirituality if the worldly minded people came to visit him. Instead, he would ask them to visit the temples of Kali, Shiva and Radha Kanta. Though the concept of adhikara or eligibility is lofty in itself, even this has been one of the causes for some great sciences to have a natural death, because even the knowledge became a property of certain pandits who refused to impart it even to genuine persons. Rama wished to know the order of manifestation of the non dual reality. The sage said that non dual reality sportively conceives the space and time, and then through its own power assumes a universal body which further goes into a succession of individual souls. At the non dual level, an initial sankalpa manifests from the subtle plane to the grosser planes. To indicate this, sage sage told Rama that the sankalpa for the sound creates akasha or ether, for touch vayu or air, for sight tejas or fire, for taste apa or water, and for smell creates prithvi or the earth. In spite of telling Rama about the order of manifestation, Vasishta suggested that instead of getting involved with the mode of creation, one should be more concerned about the means of transcending this multiplicity of creation. He said that the world was like an intensely long dream, and only waking up from sleep can break it. The reference to dreamlike nature of the world characterized by multiplicity suggests that even the explanation of the order of creation is also a dream explanation. Just as the dream does not have any regularity, the creation too does not have any certainty about it. That is why the sage said, one should not pay more attention to pain and gain and to remain unstained as a lotus leaf by the water. To explain the illusory nature of the world, he narrated the story of Dashura. In the country of Magadha, there lived a rishi named Saraloma with his son Dashura. After leading a long life of tapas, Saraloma attained Videha Mukti, liberation from the body. Being very much attached to his father, Dashura wept bitterly over his father's death and forgot to perform even his daily actions. Observing the pitiable condition of Dashura, who had a great capacity, a goddess appeared to him as an invincible voice and said that only the ignorant dragged themselves to the condition he was in, and that he should put his effort in liberating himself from the limitations of samsara. The divine voice had a transforming effect on him, and Dashura shook off his sorrow and started performing tapas strictly according to the Vedic injunctions. But he was not satisfied with the purity of any place. With an intention of finding a pure and congenial spot for his tapas, he performed arduous penance by offering parts of his body in fire. Lord Agni appeared before the Muni and asked about the intention of the sacrifice. When Dashura told him that he had been unable to find a pure place and that he wanted to sit on a tendril on top of a tree, Agni granted the boon, and Muni Dashura found a Kadamba tree in the forest and sat on a tendril at its top. Unable to attain the Brahmajnana directly, he performed the rituals like Gomedha, sacrifice of cow, Ashwamedha, that of horse, and Naramedha, that of man, according to the Vedic injunctions to develop a steady and clear mind. At once, the priceless jnana took possession of him and pervaded his being. Thus, Dashura became free from the cycle of birth and death by eradicating the vasanas and continued to live on the tendril of the Kadamba tree. One day, a goddess appeared and he asked her identity. The goddess replied that she was aware that he had attained to limitless jnana and that she was the goddess presiding over the forest. But she did not have any son, while all other divine beings enjoyed the parenthood. And troubled that she was, she had approached him to bless her with a son, else she would enter the fire out of grief. The Muni handed her a flower with all compassion and said that she would become a mother soon. However, as she had threatened to enter the fire in case her wish was not granted, the son would attain jnana only after facing many hard trials. After some time, a son was born to the goddess, who trained him in all the branches of secular knowledge, then brought him to sage Dashura and requested him to instruct it so that he could attain the Atmajnana or self-realization. The sage asked her to leave her son with him. The son of the goddess was initiated by the Muni through spiritual stories, deeper aspects of Vedanta, and methods of contemplative meditation. It was during one such communion that sage Vasishtha heard a conversation between the preceptor and the disciple as he passed by the Kadamba tree. The Muni was telling his disciple the symbolic story of Sankalpa Purusha, or the person created by Sankalpa, or the tendency to think, for convincing him of the unreality of the world with all its multiplicity, and to bring in the quiescence of mind. He was telling that the initial Sankalpa had potency to create countless thoughts, which are potential desires, with a possibility of ultimately becoming vasanas having a binding effect. He was advising the disciple to perform such actions which present themselves spontaneously without any sankalpa, because it is the sankalpa which makes one choose between them, as choice takes one away from the state. On hearing these words of sage Dashura, the disciple wanted to know more about the sankalpa, to which the sage replied that sankalpa is nothing but the manifestation of the supreme principle as visible things. It has a very humble beginning as the primeval seed. This seed becomes a sapling to gradually turn itself into a mighty tree and to totally obscure the vision of Paramatman, the ultimate. The growth of this sankalpa tree leads one to fall. One should never pay attention to sankalpa, and on doing so, one only nurtures it and makes it invincible. At the same time, it is not all that difficult to do away with the sankalpa. In fact, all that is required is the control over one's thoughts. One has to annihilate the external sankalpa with the internal one. Having destroyed the impure mind with the pure mind, one can rest firmly in one's Atmajnana. With these words, he encouraged the disciple to attain to Atmajnana by taking refuge to Paurusha and Prayatna. In this story, sage Valmiki, the author of Yoga Vasishtha, tries to impress upon the seeker the importance of sankalpa, which alone is responsible for the manifestation of multiplicity, the primal cause of misery. As other stories in the scripture, this one also is likely to be misinterpreted if one reads it superficially. It is very symbolic and has a wealth of hints for the seeker. Attachment to anything or anyone has a binding effect, and Dashura, who was attached to his father, is no exception. He is reminded of his duty by an invisible voice. The formless voice always comes from within when one is afflicted with some misery. And death of a near and dear one is perhaps the most ideal time, as one is in a receptive state. At the commencement of the spiritual journey, many persons get the feeling of lack of purity in the surroundings, and they usually start searching for ideal or congenial places. This is when one starts getting distaste for the society and the milieu, and for the introspection to start, many persons have to stop socializing, though all need not do it. Dashura, offering his parts of his own body to the fire does not mean that he was a masochist. Spiritual practices have been called as tapas in our culture, which means to heat or to burn. So Dashura was dissociating with his body through tapas. Incidentally, Dashura means one who can give up courageously. Da means to give. Karna was called as Danashura, a man of great charity, as Dana means charity. His seeking the boon to sit on a tendril of a tree for his penance is also symbolic. If one has to sit on a tendril, one has to be very light. But the lightness here is more at the psychological level than at the physical. The psychic lightness can be achieved only by eliminating the desires, by the burdens of the past and future, and by transcending time. Secondly, the tendril remains a tendril only for a short time. Consequently, to sit on a tendril, one has to remain ever fresh and young. This also is symbolic suggestion to the seeker that he can remain ever young only when he transcends time. Kadamba is a type of tree that the buds of which blossom when there is thunder and lightning. Katipaya kusumodgamaha kadambaha. Dashura, sitting on the tendril of Kadamba, means that he sits with the lightness of the mind which transcends time and in turn blossoms with the flashes of truth. Further, Valmiki, the author, gives the means of enlightenment. Dashura, he says, was unable to get the Brahmajnana directly and had to resort to Gomedha, Ashwamedha and Naramedha to achieve the steadiness of mind. It is difficult, if not impossible, to perform these sacrifices at present time, which follows that the path chosen by Dashura is not available to us. If one takes these as the rituals involving sacrifice of cow, horse and a human being, then not only the path is closed, but the path will be criminal. But then, even these sacrifices are symbolic. Go not only means a cow, but it refers to speech. Ashwa means a horse, but it also means the senses, as they are very fast in seeking their sense objects. Kathopanishad says, Indriyani hayanahur vishayans teshu gocharam. The sense organs, they say, are the horses, and the roads for them are the sense objects. While Nara definitely means a man, it can also be interpreted as Ahankara. Taking this meaning, we get an entirely new interpretation. Speech is a bridge between thought and action. The external action can be controlled through control of speech. The senses are to be controlled for controlling our desires, and if the Ahankara or I is under control, then everything else is in control. A very beautiful mantra from Kathopanishad says, Yache dvang manasi pradnyah tat yache jnana atmani jnanam atmani mahati niyachet tad yachet shanta atmani. Let the wise man merge speech in the manas and manas in the buddhi. Let him merge the buddhi in Mahat, the great self, and again in the self of peace. No matter where a flower blossoms, it has to spread its fragrance. In spite of the fact that Dashura got enlightened in a forest, a seeker sought him out to inherit his enlightenment. The advice of the preceptor to his disciple was to remain in choiceless awareness, that is, to accept things as they come without any preference on his own. This is one of the surest way of transcending time. This, incidentally, was his own approach to the reality, for one can only guide the others only that path which one has trodden himself. The fact that sage Vasishtha told an order of manifestation to Rama and concluded this sarga with a dialogue between Dashura and his disciple, wherein the role of Sankalpa and the importance of its elimination has been stressed, shows that the order of creation was told only to temporarily appease the intellectual hunger of Rama. And sooner the seeker realizes the importance of saving his time and energy by abstaining from intellectual and word jugglery, the better it is for him. However, the intellectual discussion has a tremendous fancy for the intellect which continues to fall for it. The scenic spots like Ram Tirtha create a milieu of appreciation for nature. If one is an intellectual adventurer, then it may urge him to get to question about the origin and seek intellectual explanation. But if one is a pure adventurer, it may make him seek the source. There is no doubt that this creation or the manifestation has a powerful influence on the mind, senses and body. But if one chooses to seek the creator or the source of manifestation, then he reaches ahankara, or in turn discovers that it is the sankalpa which is the source of everything. Reaching that, one finds that one was always there, and that only due to wrong identification it had been what it was, a problem. This story inspires every seeker to be a real Dashura who can sacrifice his everything: body, senses, mind, intellect and the ego, and through such sacrifice gain whatever we seek through the things that are given up.